Halloween night in Gotham was always a nightmare. The shadows grew deeper, the air colder, and the city seemed to take on an even more sinister presence. For Gotham's residents, it was a night to fear what lurked in the darkness. And this year, something had crept in that Gotham had never known. Something ancient, something evil. It had no name, no emotions, only a mask, a knife, and a thirst for blood. Michael Myers had come to Gotham City. Bruce Wayne sat alone in the Batcave, the only sound in the room the quiet hum of the Batcomputer as it processed endless streams of criminal activity across the city. He had spent hours dealing with Gotham's usual chaos, breaking up gang wars, stopping some masked criminals, and putting out the fires that came with Halloween. His mind was focused, tracking down the usual suspects, dealing with the madness of the night. But there was something else, a gnawing feeling at the back of his mind that tonight was different. Then, Oracle's voice broke through the tension. "Bruce, we've got a situation. Multiple bodies found in the East End. No witnesses, no connections, just brutal killings. No sign of struggle, but their bodies, they're a mess." Batman's gloved hands clenched into fists as he began to suit up. "Where?" "Crime Alley," she replied. He cursed under his breath. "What else?" "There's more. Arkham was supposed to receive a patient transfer from Smith's Grove Sanitarium earlier today. But something went wrong. The transport was hijacked, and the patient vanished." Batman's eyes narrowed. Who was being transferred? A pause, followed by the cold truth. Michael Myers. The name struck Batman like a punch to the gut. He knew the stories, the boogeyman, the unstoppable force that had haunted Haddonfield, the killer who'd walked out of a mental institution years ago and still haunted the world with his insatiable bloodlust. But this was Gotham. The rules here were different. It was a city of fear, yes, but this was something new, something that didn't belong. Myers wasn't just a man. He was something far darker. Gotham's East End was already soaked in blood by the time Batman arrived. The damp fog rolled in thick, swallowing the night. The streets, usually teeming with activity on Halloween, were eerily silent. 5 bodies lay on the pavement, strewn like discarded dolls. Their costumes, a vampire, witch, a werewolf, and 2 others, were soaked in dark crimson. The gruesome scene told a story. Slashed throats, limbs twisted at unnatural angles, faces frozen in expressions of terror. Batman approached cautiously, his boots soundless on the wet concrete. He knew this was no random act of violence. This wasn't just some Halloween thrill killer. No, this was something deliberate, something methodical. As he examined the bodies, his eyes flicked upward to the figure standing just beyond the shadows. The tall, pale figure in the worn, cracked mask, a butcher knife clenched tightly in one hand, held perfectly still. "Michael Myers," Batman growled, stepping forward. His cape swept behind him like a dark shadow. The shape did not speak. He merely tilted his head, as if curious. Then, with a sudden, terrifying swiftness, he lunged at Batman, the blade gleaming in the moonlight. Batman was ready. His body moved with the grace of a predator, twisting out of the way just in time. He countered with a fast, brutal punch to Myers' gut, followed by an uppercut to the chin. But Myers didn't even stagger. Instead, he grabbed Batman by the throat with one massive hand and lifted him off the ground as though he were weightless. Batman's vision blurred for a moment as the air was squeezed from his lungs. His mind raced. No one should have this strength. He fired his grappling hook, sending it into the nearest building and yanking himself free from Myers' grip. He landed in a roll, immediately springing back to his feet, only to see Myers still standing there, staring at him with unblinking, hollow eyes. Without thinking, Batman launched a batarang aimed directly at Myers' face. It struck the side of the mask, But Myers didn't even flinch. He simply reached up and plucked it from the air, twisting it in his hand before letting it fall to the ground. Batman's pulse quickened. This wasn't a man. This wasn't even something human. It was a force of nature, something that couldn't be reasoned with, something that would not stop until it had destroyed everything in its path. They clashed again, this time in a brutal, grinding contest of strength and skill. Batman threw punch after punch, aiming for the vital points: head, chest, ribs, but every strike seemed to have no effect. Myers' body was unyielding, his movements unnaturally fluid, as if he were an unstoppable machine. The battle raged through the streets, knocking over trash cans, sending debris flying. Gotham itself seemed to tremble under the weight of their struggle. Finally, with one last push, Batman managed to create enough distance to deploy his smoke pellets. The thick cloud enveloped them both, but even in the obscured vision, Batman could feel the heavy, deliberate breathing of his adversary. Myers was still coming. Batman knew he couldn't overpower him. He needed a new strategy. With a snap of his wrist, he released a small explosive charge attached to a metal wire, setting a trap for the shape. He led Myers down into the crumbling remains of an old bridge that stretched over the Gotham River. The plan was simple: lure him to a vulnerable spot, detonate the charge, and bring him down into the water. Batman was counting on the fact that even Michael Myers could drown. Myers took the bait. As the figure moved across the bridge, Batman pressed a button on his utility belt, and the ground beneath Myers gave way. A loud explosion rang out as the bridge crumbled, sending the killer plunging into the dark, churning waters below. Batman stood at the edge, watching as the ripples spread across the river. He could barely hear the sound of the water. The heavy, rhythmic breathing of Myers was gone. For a moment, there was silence. Maybe, just maybe, it was over. But as Batman turned to leave, he heard it. Slow, heavy, the breathing. From the darkness, Myers emerged from the water, his mask dripping, his eyes locked on Batman with a hunger that hadn't subsided. The shape was still alive. Batman's heart pounded in his chest. He'd fought countless enemies in his career, but nothing like this. Michael Myers was more than just a killer. He was an embodiment of fear itself. But Batman was Gotham's protector, and tonight, he would not let this nightmare win. With grim determination, Batman led Myers toward Arkham Asylum, hoping the complex security measures inside would hold him long enough for a solution to present itself. He activated the high-frequency sonic emitters, triggering a painful screech in the air that disoriented the killer. Gas flooded the area, and containment fields sprang up, trapping the shape within a reinforced cell. Yet, even as Batman stood in the observation room, watching through the glass, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only temporary. Michael Myers was not a man who could be held forever. He was a force, an unstoppable force, and even the most secure cells in Arkham might not be enough to contain him. Batman turned, leaving the darkened hallways of Arkham behind him. As he did, the breathing continued. Somewhere in the depths of the asylum, the shape was waiting. Batman knew one thing for sure: the nightmare had only just begun.